This is the Jocko Underground Podcast, number 21, with Echo and me, Jocko. And we had an event take place a week ago, I guess. A guy by the name of Jim Surlsley, he was on Podcast 200. Just an awesome guy. He was a Vietnam veteran. He was severely wounded in 1969, about a month before he was done with his tour in Vietnam. He ended up as a triple amputee and lost both of his legs and lost one of his arms. And he just died. He just died on May 30th. It's 2021 right now. And it obviously horrible. It was unexpected. But his story, when he came on the podcast and what he lived through, there was some layers to it. When he'd come home from Vietnam with this, triple amputee, went to rehab for 9 months, and he learned all the things that you have to learn when you lose both your legs and one arm. How you're going to get by. What are you going to do? What are you going to do to get around the house? How to use a wheelchair, an electric wheelchair, a regular wheelchair. How you're going to get in and out of that thing. What you need to be careful of. What you got to do to keep yourself as healthy as you can. And he went to that thing for 9 months. And then he carried on. And he carried on with his life. He started a roofing company. He went to college. He started doing real estate. He ended up being the national commander of the disabled American veterans, later in his life. But he basically just carried on. And just an amazing human, an amazing person, and obviously hugely inspirational for anybody, because he's doing all that. And he's doing it as a guy with one arm. And it was interesting because when we got done with that podcast, we ended up sitting around and talking for a while. And one of the things that he brought up was, he said, "Have you ever heard of a guy named Louis Puller?" And he obviously hadn't listened to the fact that we had done a podcast about Chesty Puller, the most iconic Marine of all time. And then we did a podcast about Louis Puller, his son, who was also wounded in Vietnam, severely wounded in Vietnam. He lost both of his legs. He had massive damage done to his hands. Louis Puller did. This is Chesty Puller's son. And he came home, and eventually in 1993, Louis Puller Jr. killed himself. And he wrote an incredible book, and we covered the book on the podcast, on podcast 122. The book is called Fortunate Son. And so with that background, which Jim Surlsley didn't know, he says, "Have you ever heard of a guy named Louis Puller?" And I said, "Yes, sir, absolutely. I have. We did a podcast on him. I know about him." And he said, "I was in rehab with Louis Puller," which was obviously a very interesting connection, that he knew him. And then he made this point, Jim Surlsley made this point, that he said Louis Puller never accepted 100% in his heart what had happened to him. He said he accepted at 98, maybe 99%, but he never accepted 100% what had happened, and never accepted that reality and moved on with it. And he said, and that's what killed him. We have to be able to accept reality. And I'm not saying I could do it. I'm not making that claim. I'm saying Jim Surlsley did it, and he said he did it, and he's saying that Louis Puller Jr. didn't do it. But we have to at least try and do that. We did one of these a little time ago where I was talking about the fact that, everybody's a little bit insane, right? Everybody's a little bit crazy because we all paint our own reality, because the actual definition, the clinical definition of someone is insane is someone that their reality doesn't match actual reality. Well, guess what? We all have different varying levels of what reality is. Some of us are pretty close. Some of us are a little further up, and you meet someone they think they're in a better situation than they're in, or they think they're in a worse situation. They're like, their reality isn't quite matched up. And it goes all the way from people that are really closely aligned to what reality is. That's, I think, probably the best place to be, to people that are by the definition of insane, where their reality is totally different from actual reality. But, you meet some people that are like, oh, I'm going to be a football player. And you're like, like their reality isn't there. You know what I'm saying? Or whatever. You pick a thing that somebody thinks is happening, or they think someone cares about them. And I know they care about me. It's like, that's not really the reality. And they're just not there, right? They're not insane. They're not over on the far side of the spectrum where the reality totally doesn't match, but you can tell it's off a little bit. So we have the possibility of doing that as well when it comes to accepting reality and accepting where we're at 100% and accepting things the way they unfolded 100%. And again, I'm not trying to say I could do this. I have no idea. I've never been in a situation like that. But I'm going to say that we do have to look around. I've never been in that extreme of a situation, but I've been in some tough situations. And when you get in those tough situations, it doesn't help to keep that little 2%, 3%, 4%, 1% that's different from reality. It doesn't help. That little thing will eat away at you. When you wish that this wouldn't have happened, or you wish you would have made a different decision, you complain about it, you blame, other people, you blame the circumstances, and you get eaten up by that stuff. Stop doing that. Stop doing that. It's not beneficial to you. It's not beneficial to me. This is really a tenet of extreme ownership, right? I know I can't control everything, but I can control how I respond to it. I know bad things happened, and I could sit there and blame other people. I could wish that it didn't win a different way. I could wish that it would have never happened. I could wish I would have made a different decision. All those things. Don't do that. Stop wishing, stop complaining, stop blaming. Instead, be like Jim Searlesley, a freaking hero, and start doing. Start making things happen. With that, let's get into some Q&A, I guess.
Yes, sir.
So it's a rough subject.
First question. I'm a 7th grade English teacher in Virginia, and things are not bad in the classroom, but it's my first year teaching, and I definitely have a lot to learn. I have one class in particular that's almost all boys, and started this year out rowdy, and have made great strides in learning when it's appropriate to be energetic, and when they need to respect others and their right to an education. But some days, one or another of them will really be feeling his oats, and the others tend to feed on that. I struggle to rein this in without a harsh tone and a demand, but it has to stop so that their classmates can learn. Do you and Echo have any advice for leadership applied to 12 and 13-year-old kids? I know you're both parents, so I'd be interested in your insights here.
Yeah. Cool question. And I got some ideas about it. And these are all kind of ideas that I've used at various points in various situations with both my own kids, with SEAL platoons. Number one, that is a little excerpt of what we are doing on the Jocko Underground podcast. So if you want to continue to listen, go to jockounderground.com and subscribe. And we're doing this to mitigate our reliance on external platforms so we are not subject to their control. And we're doing it so we can give you more control, more interaction, more direct connections, better communications with us, strengthen this legion of troopers that are in the game with us. So thank you. It's jockounderground.com. It costs $8.18 a month. And if you can't afford to support us, we can still support you. Just email assistance@jockounderground.com and we'll get you taken care of. Until then, we will see you mobilized underground.